Hi Spring fans, welcome to another special installment of Spring Tips. This is yet another sort of mid-season interregnum episode of Spring Tips because I wanted to bring to you something that's very exciting that just dropped on Master on Spring Framework, which is the WebMvc.fn programming model. So if you've ever used the Spring WebFlex functional reactive endpoint style, that's now available for Spring MVC based applications, servlet based applications. And it's not a reactive thing. It's just for Spring MVC, right? It is it's an equivalent or an analog to the at-rest controller style, but for Spring MVC, which is super cool, right? And this is possible, of course, because Spring Framework and Spring MVC with it all assume a Java 8 baseline. And so when we introduce the functional reactive sort of DSL for Spring WebFlex, people really liked it, and one common sort of request was that this would be made available for Spring MVC applications as well, and that's now happening. It's on Master. I would love for you to all try it out, and we're going to go ahead and introduce some of those features here today in this look at the new stuff. So in order to get it, of course, we have to use the latest and greatest Spring Boot, which in turn brings in the latest and greatest Spring MVC, WebMvc.fn. I'm just going to bring in the web support. I'll bring in Lombok and DevTools, and that's it. Right? You can bring in whatever else you want. You can use JPA and JDBC and all these other things. It is just a regular Spring MVC application. It's just that we're using a different programming model. So we're going to hit generate, and by default, this will result in a Tomcat-based application. I'm going to change that out. I'm going to swap out Tomcat and use Undertow, although you could use Jetty or Tomcat or any configuration. You could even harkening back to the servlet deployment options Spring tip that I did a few years ago now. You can even turn this into a .war and deploy it to a traditional web server, traditional servlet container. All these are fine choices, good choices, right? Lots of options. So let's go to our build. I'll be using Java 11. Thank you. And I want to bring in Undertow. Okay. I'm going to exclude Tomcat. Okay. Spring Boot Starter Tomcat. Group ID. Okay. So there's my exclusion. And so in every way, this is just a basic application. Let's go ahead and just start it up like so. Get going. Now, I'm going to use some of the nice new properties that are inside of a Spring Boot. If I had repositories, I could use this. Right? I don't have these properties, so it doesn't matter. But I don't have JP on the class path. But if I did, that's what I'd be using. Okay, so restart. Okay, so now let's see what this looks like. So let's say I've got class product, all right, and private, or actually better yet, person. Okay, so private string name, private long ID, at data, at all args, no args, constructor, right? Just basic stuff, right? Nothing fancy here. And I want to create a class person service, private final set person people set.of new person 1 Jane 2 Josh 3 Gordon 4 Tammy. All right, so there's a few names here, and nope, I can't leave that exceeding the margin. I just can't. Phil Webb wouldn't approve. So okay, good. Now we have that. Set person all. Okay, so just a very simple set of endpoints here. Person by ID, and in retrospect, I'm wishing I had just used Spring Data JPA, but such as life filter p p.getID dot equals ID dot find first or else throw new illegal argument exception. Okay, no person dot get name with that ID found. All right, so there's this. Okay, so that's just a very simple service. Now we can create our endpoint. Okay, we can create our endpoint centrally like this. We're using the functional reactive style, but it's not reactive. It's just the functional style. It's the WebMvc .fn style, right? So router function server response routes and use the builder. So there's two builders in the functional reactive style, right? One is to say router function dot routes or dot route, and then put a request predicate like this, foo, and a handler function like this. And then you could even chain it together and say and route, post bar, whatever, right? You can do all that kind of stuff. That all still works, but that's also been, I think, superseded by this other style, which I quite like, called route. So you can say route dot, use the builder there, bring that in, and I can say, okay, people, and I provide a new handler function, and then you build the whole thing, right? So you build, okay, and so the job here is to inject the person service, PS, okay? So I'm going to provide a server response dot okay dot body, and notice that for the body parameter, I don't have to specify a class literal, right? In fact, there's no need to specify that at all, because unlike in the Spring WebFlex world where I'm returning a publisher of type T, where T is going to be consumed as a stream over time, and thus I can't assume that I have the whole body of the publisher. I can't pass the whole thing to Jackson for JSON marshalling. Here, I'm going to pass the whole thing. The whole body I send back is going to be passed, in one file swoop to the message converter, the HTTP message converter, and so it can figure out what, it's not going to try and figure out what each stanza is. It's just going to figure out the whole thing. So ps.all, okay, clean this up a little bit, replace it with that, replace that with a lambda, use static imports, and voila. Okay, so there's my functional sort of WebFlex style, or WebFlex.fn style endpoint, except that it's not WebFlex, right? So we can see that in action here. I'm going to recompile 0.6 seconds to see the thing start up. Point people. Okay, so there's my application. Sample data, good, that's working just fine. Let's say I want to create another endpoint that gives me the data by the ID, right? So ID r okay dot body ps dot find by ID, and here I want to get access to the path variable. So I say r dot path variable ID, and I turn this into a long. All right, same as before. Rebuild. Okay, 0.259 seconds. 2, there's that. 3, 4, etc. Right? So it's very easy to make changes. This is just a server. It's just a web server, and of course, all this time you can see I've been using Undertow. Right? Here's XNIO. Where's the Undertow packages? So all that's there, right? It's just a regular servlet container. Like I said, I could package this up as a .war, etc. So this is a good example of reading, and of course you can do other things. So you can say, okay, I want to add. So person save, person in, right? And what do I want to do? I want to say this people add new person p.get name. And I guess I want to do private final atomic long counter equals new atomic long. And here, I should have done this counter dot increment, or get an increment, increment get, okay. So there we are. Okay. No database, not a very good database at all, but hey, you know, probably that should be synchronized. Okay, so we've got that. Now we're going to add a post endpoint, post people, and here I'm going to break this out into a full-on lambda. I'm going to say give me the body of the incoming request as a person, right? I can say person incoming, but of course I'll use var, and I'll say give me the name, var name, and I'll say pr.save or ps.save new person name, okay, and var result equals, and then I'm going to send that back. So I'm going to create a new URI, uri.create is people /id, so result.get id, okay, var URI, and finally I want to return a response, so I'll say server response dot created URI and pass in the result. Good stuff, look at that. Okay, so this could be cleaned up a bit, I imagine, and in fact this could be cleaned up as well, so r.body person.class. Okay, so there's our actual code. We don't need this. So that's our post endpoint, right? You can do all sorts of interesting things here. You can add, you know, it's exactly what you expect, but notice that we're attaching things to the builder object here, right? So I've got a builder to which I'm adding these endpoints, and I'm then calling build. Well, I can do, you know, I can say, okay, well, if math.random greater than 0.5, then and only then do I want to add something to id.post whatever, right? I can do dynamic things here programmatically. I can read configuration from a database. I can read from a config file or something. I can respond to some external thing, right? I don't have to add it through my Spring MVC style annotations, and we'll see what I mean by that in a second here. So let's restart this. Okay, so let's try and send some data. Curl -h content type application JSON minus HTTP localhost 8080 / people name equals Bob. All right, error. Oh, I didn't make. Did I restart? Let's just restart. Maybe the dev tools aren't working. No problem. So that's localhost 8080 people. Oopsies. Oh, it's an immutable collection. Of course it is. So new hash set, and I want the initial data to come from there. Restart. Okay, there we go. So if I add Bob again, you can see we're incrementing it. It's being added. So now I go back to the browser, go here, people, there we are. There's our 5 and 6. We got 2 different Bobs. Now, what if I want to, you know, mix and match, right? I mentioned Spring MVC style, so that you can still do that. This is a Spring MVC application, right? So heatings REST controller at get mapping name greet string name hello name. All right, rebuild that. Greet world. Okay. No bean. Just restart that. Okay. Good. So you can see we can mix and match. I've got that. Now I go to people. So I can share, I can easily take my existing application written with these Spring MVC style controllers, or Spring MVC controllers really, and then gradually add WebMvc.fn style endpoints here. And that's great because that means I can take advantage of my existing business logic, all of which was built on top of the servlet spec, and I can use this new style without having to sort of do a all at once migration, right? I can use things, I can reuse things piecemeal, and this is, after all, at the end of the day, a servlet application, right? I'm running on top of the servlet container. So, for example, if I look at this, I can say, oh well, give me the servlet request. Well, there it is, right? There's my HTTP servlet request, and I can do whatever I want with that. Get the auth type, the context path, or cookies, or whatever. All this stuff is just as before. If you want it there, it's there. We're not trying to hide that at all. It's just a more convenient DSL. So when do you use which? Well, as always, the same is true for Spring WebFlex. You can use the functional sort of style if you want to have all the routing in one place, right? Like this. I've got routing here. I've also got the handler logic here, and we'll talk about that in a second. But the routing is here; it's all in one place. Whereas here, the routing, the matching, the predicates are strewn about the code base in the different packages in which you find REST controllers or controllers. So it's nice to be able to centralize all that here. The other thing is, if you want to control what gets registered dynamically, right here I can decide based on some external condition whether to register something or not. Whereas this is, once you've defined the method, it's very hard to sort of undo that or not register the method. You have to just comment it out in the code. There's no way to easily dynamically register things at runtime. Now, going back to this code, this is not so bad. Here, it's not so bad either. But here, there's 3 lines of code, and it starts to complicate and starts to muddy this router function. So a very common pattern here is to create a handler. So person handler. It's not a particular. There's not a specific stereotype in Spring called a handler. It's not @handler or anything like that. But the way it works is you remember this handler function here. It's a functional interface. So implement handler function, server response, and that's the contract. And then you can just get rid of this part right here, and that, and there you go. And so I say handle get all reservations. Okay. Good. Here, server response dot, and what we want to do is same as before. I'm going to extract out, for example, the this logic here. Well, actually, the first one I'm going to do is this one. So it'll just be here. In order for that to work, I need to inject the person repository, person service, I suppose. Person service, good stuff, and just delegate. Now you can use method references. So the benefit of this approach is that you get the best of both worlds. You get the routing in one place, but you get the business logic in separate, isolated, easily tested things, and you don't muddy the code, right? So ph handle get all reservations, and just use a method reference. This one, same thing, right? So handle handle get reservation by ID. Take that. And of course, R. Good. Person service. All right. Handle get reservations by ID. Okay, and then finally the post, which is, again, we're just doing Java 8 rules here. You have to have a method that can be functionally substituted for the lone or single non-abstract method on a functional interface, and that's what I'm doing here. So the final one is post or create new person or whatever. Handle post person. All right. Good. And then this one, extract this out. Okay, so PH, handle post person, good stuff. Okay, so now it's much cleaner. You can see I've got the routes, I've got the handler logic. You can command click on this to get to it, so it's not like it's a big deal, even if it is in a separate code page or separate package. But now you've got also all the logic, all the routing logic. So if you want to change it, var root equals my whatever. Well, of course, there's no reason you couldn't do that, right? You could say root equals this. Okay, so not bad at all. Let's get rid of that, of course, but you could. Now, let's see, restart that. We've got our application, it's working. One of the nice things about being top of the servlet spec is you can reuse all that business logic. So let's just make sure everything's working. Here we go. 2, and we can post. All right, there's Bob. Okay, so that's working. Now we can reuse our existing infrastructure as well. So remember, all the things you did before in the servlet API in Spring MVC, those continue to work. So class simple filter extends generic filter. And I'm just going to create a servlet filter, just a regular filter that Spring Boot will in turn register for us as a filter registration bean. And you can directly register filters that way as well, but this will get done for me. Okay. So entering simple filter chain .do filter request res. Okay. Exiting. Now that's the Spring MVC filter in servlet filter style, but you can also hang filters off the router function itself, just as in Spring WebFlex. So here, same basic approach. If you understand the first one, then this is natural. Logging out the information. What I'm doing is logging out the information. So log entering okay. Try. Finally. Log.info. Exiting. Good. All right. Basic filter. So we can turn this into a lambda, of course. restart. We'll see which ones get invoked first. I think you'll find that the servlet filter, this full servlet filter, gets invoked before the filter that we hang off the router function. So, whatever. And here it says entering simple filter. That's this thing here, the servlet filter. And then entering the handler filter function. And then exiting the handler filter function. Right? And then finally exiting the simple filter. So the generic servlet filter wraps the nested filter that's attached to the router function, which is very convenient. Okay, so again, all the things you know about still continue to work. You can reuse existing REST controllers, you can co-locate them. You've got this nice DSL that doesn't abstract away or hide anything to do with the servlet spec if you really need it, so you can get access to the servlet request from each request. You can register filters and register servlets and reuse them just as before. And of course these can be deployed to any servlet container. I swapped out Tomcat to Undertow, and I could have packaged this as a .war and deployed it to a servlet container that way as well. Whatever your prerogative, this gives you a lot of flexibility, and I really hope you'll try it out and give it a spin and let us know what you like and what you don't, what you want to see and what you don't. And with that, my friends, as always, thanks for watching, and we'll see you next time.